Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is another Brent Shimko production, and you're watching another episode of what the heck am I even talking about? Today we'll be doing another rock retrospective, and if you've been watching any of my music videos previously, you realize quickly that these rock retrospectives are actually more about me than they are the artists. But in any case, today we're going to be talking about Pink Floyd and the impact that band has had on my life, which has been quite profound. The previous artists that I focused on, Alice Cooper and Kiss, primarily focusing on Ace Frehley, those are really foundational archetypes I kind of adopted, personalized, and really those influences shaped me in a unique way. But Pink Floyd had a different kind of effect. It was more of a profound, emotional, almost spiritual effect. And so, trigger warning for those of you that are a little sensitive to kind of emotional ideas and themes. It could get a little intense at times, so you're welcome to click off this video and we'll see you in the next one. But if you're interested in hearing my take and the impact that this group had on my life, well, grab your favorite beverage, your coffee or your tea. If you're like me, you've got both. Your gin and tonic, your kombucha, your moonshine, whatever it is you need, and settle in. We'll get into the topic at hand. But first, there's always a but first. Again, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, I think you'll see this is kind of an ongoing conversation. I'm just unpackaging, and if people stick around and listen to it, I think that's really cool. But I kind of feel no pressure to make a concise, well-contained, packaged presentation, because one video somewhat builds on what's come before it. And in this one, I just want to kind of tie up a loose end that I neglected to mention in the Kiss video. And this is a story about Ace, and this has to do with just the coolness of what I aspire to be, and just the charismatic coolness that Ace was and I believe still is to this day. And so yeah, that was a really great video for me to record for you as well. I had such delight in putting these things together for you to enjoy. I hope you're enjoying them. Let me know if you're enjoying them. And in any case, in the last year or so, I was kind of looking into Kiss as a group. Documentaries on the rise and fall of Kiss. There was one, I think, when Kiss ruled the world. These kind of hour-long documentaries and then interviews. I posted the Tom Snyder Halloween interview for you in that Kiss video. I urge you to go check that out. I rewatched it this morning, and I was just laughing my head off. It is so good. But that's kind of not the thing. There was one documentary or one interview, I forget where, and I don't believe this was staged. I think this was completely spontaneous. But the band was backstage, and they were kind of finishing up this interview with some local reporter in whatever city they were in. And the interview finished, and the rest of the band members started marching off, in their big attire. They had all their stage gear on, ready to go, and this was kind of just before they began their set. And so Ace was the last one kind of to leave the scene, and off kind of to the side there was this mother holding, I don't know how old the kids was. I can't tell the age of these kids, but it's like 3, 4, 5-year-old kid, and the kid's eyes were like as wide as saucers, because seeing these superhero, larger than life characters, just feet away, and for all I know, it could have been staged. I could have been Ace's kid for all I know. But in any case, like out of the corner of his eye, he caught his mother and child, and he kind of quickly went over them and gave the little guy a pat on the head and squeezing his cheek, and then grabbed him up in his arms, and they took a group photo together, and the kid was just, like I said, the most exciting experience of his little 3-year-old life, possibly to this day. But he's just made this kid feel like a king, and I so love that. There's something in me. I've always had a heart for children, even as a child. There was something relatable to me about this creature that's come forth, this new life, and it's always fascinated me, and so just to have that ability to appreciate children and make them feel special. I just love that special moment in Ace. Like the rest of the band, they were gone. They were in the zone thinking about the show coming up, and Ace had time to just make this little kid feel special. So I thought that was super cool. But now let's contrast that with a band that I don't consider particularly cool. And Pink Floyd, they were never high on my cool register. And, all the guys are awesome. I have much appreciation for the talent and the the music they've put together, the chemistry that was there on and off throughout the years. And, of course, we're speaking of Nick Mason on drums, David Gilmour on guitar, Richard Wright on keyboards, and Roger Waters bass, and the kind of primary creative force in the band once Syd Barrett had departed. And really this kind of retrospective is focused on not so much the Syd Barrett years. I didn't have a huge appreciation for that earlier stuff. It's once they kind of developed their sound and kind of what's known as the big 4 or 5 albums in their career leading right up to their breakup in the early 1980s. That was the season that it was that music that made an impact on me. But let's go way back again. Strap on your time traveler, climb into your time machine. Before I'd ever heard a proper playing of Pink Floyd, any of their songs, I remember being in grade either 5 or 6. I think it was grade 6, so I would have been about 10 years old. And here we call that elementary school, or others call it grade school. And somehow that refrain from Another Brick in the Wall, we don't need no education, we don't need no thought control, no dark sarcasm in the classroom, teacher, leave those kids alone. There was a group of us that, for whatever reason, we latched onto these lyrics. And at lunchtime and recess time, and it just recently I discovered that recess time is the union mandated workplace break time, so that the teachers could go have their smoke break throughout the day. But in any case, we had a 15-minute recess in the morning and the afternoon, and then a half-hour lunchtime. And on those break times, we'd link arms and we'd march around the school singing, "We don't need no education," and just stomping around. And there'd be, if memory serves, there was like 4 or 5 of us that were consistently just gathering. We did this for about a week or so. I don't know how long that lasted. It wasn't like we were obsessed with it, but we had kind of caught that groove, and we just kept repeating it. we don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. And then we just kept repeating that over and over while marching around. And sometimes other kids, so there'd be a line of like 10 or 15 of us just stomping around, the perimeter of the school, like some bunch of weird ghouls or something. I don't know what they thought we were up to. Some kind of subversive movement or something. And then every once in a while we'd yell out, "Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone," and just stomping around, having the time of our lives. And I don't know if any of us actually knew the music, but it was like this catchy refrain, and it's something we grabbed onto is like this anti-authoritarianism or something. Like we were breaking the bonds of our oppression, and at age 10 or 11, I wasn't particularly political at that time. I didn't have any affiliation to any ideology. I was just trying to grow up and have fun and be a kid. But there was something about the spirit of that. It was kind of rebelliousness, but it was sort of like this rise up and I don't know. It's something that's been part of me, I guess, from the beginning, even prior to this. Like it's not something that started in the schoolyard. It's something that I adopted because of something prior to me, and I can shoot some more retrospectives as to what I think that is, but we won't go into it in this video. But yeah, like these early childhood days. And another thing, before I'd ever really heard a proper playing of any Pink Floyd albums, was the imagery that came out through the animations of that movie that went with The Wall. The 1979 double album and the subsequent movie that came out after. And I hadn't seen the movie itself. I hadn't heard the album itself. But back in the day, I used to go downtown. We'd hop on a bus. I lived out in the suburbs, and we'd hop a bus, go downtown to the record stores and the comic book stores and the smoke shops, and that's where we'd buy our leather studded arm gauntlets and all the rock and roll patches we used to put on the back of our cut-off jean jackets, and everyone was, headbands and bandanas, and it was so goofy, but whatever. That was my childhood. But in any case, you'd go to these places and they'd have these posters and all these bands, and wasn't necessarily familiar with them, but with Pink Floyd, you had that iconic, the marching hammers, the crossed hammers. Marching in formation, and just looking at this thinking, what's that all about? And so there was like this sense that Pink Floyd was about something very, very large or very, very profound to me, almost mysterious. And over the years, I think I've been able to unlock some of that mystery, but we'll see. So I did actually prepare notes for this one because this kind of go all over the place, and I did want to make it somewhat coherent and not miss some important points. But really, my first exposure to Pink Floyd music was on FM radio, and so that would have been in my teenage years, and you'd hear the occasional say Money from the Dark Side of the Moon album, or Comfortably Numb, and it didn't really do anything for me, and I know why, and some of you might be able to guess why, and it is well, let me just backtrack for 1 second. FM radio at that time in the early to mid 80s, like there wasn't classic rock as a format. these bands were still making music at that time. So like Pink Floyd wasn't a classic rock band at the time. You know, you had oldies music, which would have been, you know, the Beatles and you know, Chuck Berry and some of those kind of bands. You know, you didn't. It was still kind of concurrent, not like today where you've got classic rock radio as an actual format, and you hear the same 17 songs over and over and over. But yeah, it's like Pink Floyd. Actually hearing the music, it was like, yeah, you know, whatever. But then I got a hold of that double album, The Wall, and I was just blown away. And so this was to me like the introduction to the concept album. And Pink Floyd, The Wall, I couldn't listen to a single track. I don't have like a favorite track. I don't have a favorite Pink Floyd album. I don't have a favorite Pink Floyd song. All of these creations are one coherent unit to me. And so The Wall would get listened to from beginning to end over and over and over. And there was just something I couldn't explain at the time, you know, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. I wasn't aware of why I was connecting to it, but I was connecting to this music in a very powerful way. I guess at the time I was attracted to the storytelling. This was a narrative of a very human experience. And for those of you that are fans of Pink Floyd, you may kind of understand this is a semi-autobiographical account of Roger Waters' own experience in life. You know, from childhood to stardom to his struggle and what he described as conceptually a wall that he had built up around himself. And what I came to discover is these walls are things that we're all capable of building up around ourselves. And so, I started building my Pink Floyd collection, and, you know, Dark Side of the Moon came, and Wish You Were Here, and Animals was the final cut. I love that album. I'm not going to go into, you know, a song by song, album by album breakdown, but every one of those albums was like a standalone piece of art, and there's a flow through each of them. There's a stream of consciousness that Roger Waters, as a creative director, primarily is taking you on this journey of discovery, of retrospection, of helping build a narrative, I guess. And then, like all good things, you know, some things like Pink Floyd, it came to an end. You know, there were differences that arose within the band, and they decided to split up. And Roger ended up making a handful of solo albums. David Gilmour had a solo album, but that was never on my radar. It wasn't really promoted, so I never sought it out at the time. I've never kind of gone back and seen what David Gilmour has offered. Maybe when I have time. I've got a long list of music I want to get to as far as exploring the new music that I haven't really been exposed to in the past. But David Gilmour's solo stuff, I really have no comment on. Even the pros and cons of hitchhiking, I'm somewhat familiar with, as well as Radio Chaos. But the Amused to Death CD, when it came out, again, this is when I was a young adult. I would have been either 19 or 20, somewhere around there. And I grabbed that, and again, another magnificent concept album. I have no idea why this this offering never gained any traction as far as radio play or appreciation in music circles. To me, it's one of the greatest albums that I've ever owned. I mean, if you're not familiar with it, just go ahead and check it out. It's very reminiscent of the Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, as far as, you know, some of the, not so much the content, but the production value and the talent. I mean, Roger Waters grabbed all kinds of amazing talent to put that album together, as far as singers and musicians. You know, Jeff Beck was featured on that one. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you're a Pink Floyd fan and you've never heard them used to death. It's on my recommended playlist for you. And as well, the Shine On box, I think it was called the Shine On box set, and it had kind of that essential Pink Floyd once they had discovered their sound. And that included, you know, I think the Piper at the Gates of Dawn, or well, maybe not, but it had Echoes, it had Dark Side, it had you know, the big five there. It as well had Momentary Lapse of Reason, and that one that had come out. I can't remember if I ever bought that one, but I was well aware of that music, and you know, the post Roger Waters sound. It was that how do they call it now? Dad rock. Like it just didn't have the same punch. You know, it was listenable. It was catchy somewhat, but it didn't put that fire in my belly in any kind of way, or it didn't have that spark. I did see Pink Floyd live in concert in Winnipeg. I think that was in '94. Amazing show. You know, the musicianship, the effects, the light show. You know, it was all just a very polished production, and had a great time. I was glad I saw it, but without Roger Waters, to me, it was just, I don't know, it was something missing. The chemistry just isn't there. But anyway, Shine On came out on, of all days, my birthday. It was on November 2nd. I believe it was 1992. I've got my laptop right here. I could probably look it up. But I believe it was 1992. And so it's just kind of one of those synchronicities. I don't know if you guys are into that, but there have been synchronicities in the last little while. I'll make a whole video sharing some of the wild stuff that's been going on. But I saw 2 shooting stars like in less than a week, and like big bright shooting stars here, just outside, walking around in the yard at night, and they were connected to events that it's almost like there are these markers in your life, and so during that season, back in the early '90s, there was all these synchronicities that were happening in my life, and a lot of it was connected to the thought process or things that were going on as a result of being immersed in this Pink Floyd sound. And again, it was primarily those big albums that were released in the mid '70s, you know, beginning with Dark Side of the Moon. In any case, you know, that was also a season of my life where I was making lifestyle choices that weren't very beneficial to me. Let's put it that way. And as a result, there was somewhat of I hesitate to call it a mental health crisis, but there were concerns. I was displaying erratic behavior, and the people closest to me were worried that something might be going on. And back at that time, it's sort of when it was just kind of prior to when a lot of these antidepressants were being prescribed for things. And so there was there's kind of a suspicion that I was suffering from a mood disorder. Uh, some call it manic depression, others call it bipolar. In hindsight, I would look at it as environmental stress due to lifestyle. I was self-medicating with as much alcohol as I could get my dirty little fingers on. I was using tobacco, nicotine heavily at the time. I was using recreational drugs, aka cannabis, marijuana back at the time, prior to it being legalized here in Canada. I had bad dietary decisions. I was living on processed food and junk. My sleep patterns and circadian rhythms were just garbage. There was probably more stress and anxiety in my life. Not a wonderful self-image at that time. I don't know why. I'm completely secure in who I am now, but I was kind of timid or shy. But the booze brought the personality out, and so it was a way to medicate, anesthetize myself. I'm not going to try to pronounce that correctly because I'll just struggle it for the next 30 seconds, and we don't need that. But in any case, there was this idea that I need to get checked out. So, whatever, This was back before the days where they have what they call wellness checks. Folks, just a word of warning or a word to the wise. If you suspect a loved one, a family member, a friend of struggling with something, please do not call 911 and ask for a wellness check to be done on them. They do not end well. I'm not going to go into it right here, but if you want, you can go search on YouTube, the internet, on wellness checks gone bad. They don't end well, and I'll just move on from there. But my intervention, I was willing, and I was kind of escorted to a nearby hospital, and they had a psychiatric facility, and so I got to spend a night in the mental ward for the psycho ward. That's definitely not politically correct. I don't know, mental health facility with psychiatric care, but just I was there for overnight observation, and they took blood tests just to see what was going on. I wasn't even drinking heavily at the time. I was just kind of flying high on life. And so there was this kind of concern that nobody should be that energetic and that effervescent, and so it was kind of this real concern, like why is Brent acting this way? So anyways, I came out of that evaluation as like, basically, yeah, he's fine. There's really nothing wrong with him. But while I was there, I was allowed to take whatever I wanted. And so I had my little cot or whatever. And they had this recreational area. And it was like an open ward where there were a number of patients there. For whatever reasons, I never really got into asking why people were there. But whatever, if people have struggles, there's places for them to go. But in any case, I grabbed all my Pink Floyd CDs because I was really into it at the time, and this Roger Waters' Amused to Death CD. And they had this TV room, and there was a stereo in there with a CD player. And so I was listening to all this stuff and watching TV, and, people would come and hang out, and we were having a grand, it was like a party in there, I was the DJ, and everybody was just getting into this Pink Floyd with me, and like we were just grooving. All we needed was a few drinks, and it would have been a right on just like going to the bar. Just hanging out with old friends. And I remember this older lady. She must have been in her 70s, maybe older, and she used to just, well, not used to, But while I was there, again, it was less than a 24-hour stay there. But the whole time she was just kind of in her house coat, and her slippers and kind of shuffling around. And she was maybe not even 5 feet tall, like just this dwarf of a lady, but just this kindly, sweet, cute little face. And by the time I was ready to leave the next morning, she came up to me and said, I really like that music you play. And like there's something about what was going on in that time that Roger Waters had an ability to connect with people. And again, the musicianship, it's more than just the lyrics. I don't know if people were connecting with the lyrics, but there is a creative vision that you have, and everybody is involved in the process, and so it's not just a nod to Roger personally, but yeah, I came out of that, and so there was possibly a concern after the fact that I might need to be on some medication. So I was on a mood stabilizer for a number of years, but that kind of, it seemed to all resolve itself. And I am going to do a video one day on just some of my health challenges, issues that I faced, how I've overcome them. It's not medical advice. It's just more of my testimony, sharing my journey with y'all. It's not to say what worked for me is going to work for you, but maybe somebody can get some value out of it. But yeah, there was kind of this mental health crisis, and there was kind of sort of an associated identity crisis that came with it, because once I was kind of I don't want to say agreeable to the fact, but it's sort of a diagnosis did end up coming down. I was like, yes, this is bipolar disorder. And since then, I think the current thinking about this has changed about some of these mood disorders. I don't want to speak too much on that, but in any case, there was this suggestion that your thoughts are not your thoughts. It's just the result of chemical processes, your neurobiology, your neurochemistry. And I thought that's not cool. Who am I if am I just a product of chemical and hormonal responses? Is that what I've been reduced to? And so I mean, since we're here, we may as well talk about it. But I was prescribed some lithium carbonate, which is supposed to be this mood stabilizer, and the psychiatrist I was referred to, he was able to prescribe this, and he said, yeah, it's no big deal. It's just, you'll have to take a pill every day for the rest of your life. And I remember hearing that thinking, no, that's not going to be my reality. And so in conjunction with my family doctor, this existential identity crisis caused me to make changes in my life, where I did clean up more or less everything. And I think I've said in a previous video, really the strongest thing I put in my body nowadays is a few cups of coffee a day, and that's about it. And I'm actually drinking a lot less coffee than I used to. So, but yeah, during that time, like the synchronicities just kept happening. Whether it was people I was supposed to meet, or just random, unpredictable occurrences that you never could have fabricated. Well, I'll tell you a story, and it's kind of Pink Floyd centric, but during that season where I was kind of in my heyday, and this would have been like 93, 94, somewhere around there. Actually, no, this was later. This would have been around 96. I was at a local pub, on a Friday afternoon, just kind of hanging out early afternoon. I forget. I don't think I was working at the time. I was just basically virtually homeless, living out of my car. You know, we did that back in the day, way before van life ever got popular. So, been there, done that. But in any case, I was at this kind of neighborhood pub, and there was actually quite a few people in there for like a Friday afternoon, 2 o'clock, whatever. You know, Friday there was going to be a live band later in the evening, and so the place would have been packed by the end of the night, and I pretty much always stayed to the end of the night. But in any case, I was there just kind of shooting pool, and they had I haven't been in a pub in forever, but they had a jukebox where you could put monies into the thing. These things called coins. This was back before the day of Bitcoin and debit cards and whatnot. But we used to use like pieces of paper and little bits of metal, and you could put them in a machine, and the machine would either give you cigarettes or drinks or chips, chocolate bars, but there was a machine that you put these monies in, and it would give you music. And so for $2 Canadian or whatever it was at the time, you know, you'd get 4 song plays or whatever. So I put in about $5, and I just started programming. You know, I was the DJ for the bar for the afternoon set, and this wasn't really intentional, but the first song I picked to play was Time by Pink Floyd, and that's from the Dark Side of the Moon album. And like, just imagine it. So I'm picking these songs. Like, they had a bunch of AC/DC albums in there, so it was a really fire set. You know, there was Guns N' Roses in there from Appetite. There was it was just a really, really good collection they had. It wasn't all pop and top 40 dance hits. It was some good rock and roll. And in any case, so you know, the background noise in the bar was just people talking, and you know, the sounds of beer bottles clinking and glasses, you know, thumping on tables. Like, it wasn't noisy in there at all. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, the intro to that song with all those bells chime, bong, 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 like everybody literally just jumped out of their chairs, if not falling off their stools. And they weren't mad at me, but it was like such a such a change in the atmosphere. And then the music started, and then you could see like people were starting to groove with my little playset. Now I guess they've got these playlists you can make on your streaming services. I guess people can subscribe to your streams or your playlists. I don't have any of those streaming services, but that was just such a fun demonstration of, like, yeah, who in their right mind kind of sets up a recording of all these different bells and chimes and grandfather clocks and I saw a documentary, like, they did that all in, they had to do takes, like they had to synchronize these chimes to all be done in one take. Like, those weren't tracks that were mixed together. That was like live recorded, mic'd up, like it, just the painstaking process to get that done. It's impressive, as well as the music. But yeah, after that season, I got my Class 1 license and started driving truck. And so spending lots of time alone and lots of time with my music. And Pink Floyd was kind of one of the things that kept me going. You know, I really, throughout the years, looked at Pink Floyd as a way to get me through different seasons of my life. For different reasons and different levels of appreciation of what I was listening to and how it was impacting me. So, and all this mental health stuff, I'm not ashamed of it. I'm happy talking about it. It's the past. It's part of who I am. It's not a factor today. Uh, it's everything I'm living for is all that I am. Liking it and loving it, all part of the plan. But in any case, yeah, it was like through the late 1990s into the early 2000s, I kind of slowly drifted away from most media, most popular music, and there was like this 20-year silence. There was a spiritual awakening where I've said in previous videos, like I've embraced the faith of God as understood through a biblical paradigm. Though I don't use the term Christian, I would categorize myself as born again, but more of a paradigm of the gospel of the kingdom, or the gospel of Christ, rather than the practices and doctrines of the church. But again, we'll probably do a more in-depth spiritual treatment, because some of these themes they're inevitably going to creep in, and there'll be a little more of that coming in this video. But we're not going to turn this into a Bible study by any means. Just don't worry about that. Just relax. So, take a sip. I'm almost ready for a cookie, but let's see if we can make it to the end without cracking into that delicious looking box of cookies over there. But anyways, yeah, it was kind of like from the early 2000s to really around the time of COVID. I wasn't that concerned with pop music or listening to the radio. I'd drive around in silence, just me and my thoughts. I wasn't interested in the radio or having a stack of CDs to. I didn't need all this extra noise. I think that's kind of a symptom of our generation, and it has been like that probably for the last 30 or 40 years. Is the need to always have noise. You go to the supermarket or the mall, like there's always this noise. Like you can't get away from it. And I don't know why we can't just kind of be quiet. And where I am, I've explained this in the past. I live in a very quiet part of the universe, and I love it. Like I so appreciate the ability to be silent, to be quiet, and have that ability to reflect and think on important things, instead of having your mind cluttered with the need to process all this input. And some of it is just background noise that doesn't need to be there. You know, some people always have a television going, or the radio is always going, or CNN in the background, or what have you. Stop doing that. It's not helping you. But anyways, through COVID, I found myself having some time, so I'd go on the YouTubes and I'd find these Pink Floyd documentaries, and it was really amazing stuff. Again, things that it wouldn't occur to me even existed back in the day when I was discovering this group. There was one documentary. It was done around the time of when I think Echoes was being done, and the Live from Pompeii video was being shot. It was kind of this conversation with Oysters or something, and they were sitting around, talking with the band during rehearsals and recording studio sessions, and at meal times, and everybody's kind of having a good time in the process, and those were really the happy years of Pink Floyd. And I remember that one particular documentary. It was the one where Roger Waters had this cigarette. It was like burnt down almost right to the filter. It was so short, and he would never finish it. He would never take a puff of it. And the interviewer was asking him questions, and he was being so evasive. He's like, "What do you think of the film you're shooting?" And he would be like, "What do you mean by think? you know, or it's like he just wouldn't. He refused to answer a question. He kept tiptoeing around and being somewhat facetious and standoffish, and they were, well, it's like, are you pleased with it? It's like, what do you mean by pleased? You know, it's like, I wanted to reach through and slap him. It's like, smarten up, like, be nice. And so he thought he was being very witty or what have you, and I guess the nod to Andy Edwards. We're going to be talking more about Andy. These guys embodied part of that English aesthetic, and they're quite the opposite of these bands I've previously covered that really got into the music industry, into rock and pop superstardom, basically with nothing, barely any talent and just a desire to succeed. These guys, they were the posh boys. They were kind of from the privileged families. They had the means and the wherewithal to have the connections, to know the people who could get them the deal or the contract or the studio time or what have you. And so it was like this band was inevitably going to happen, just because of their background. And these weren't working class stiffs. These were architectural, faculty of architecture students that all met in college or university, and they decided, as a career path, we can hook up with the establishment, or we could pave a different course for ourselves, and they chose the road down music, artistry, creativity, and so it sounds like they were very creative individuals to begin with, and they decided to express it through music. So good decision. I appreciate the decision. As bad as architecture is these days, I don't know if you would have made your splash in that realm, but I do appreciate what you've laid on the tracks that have become the soundtrack of my life. But yeah, it was like 20 years of this kind of silence, this reflection of my life, and then being reintroduced to the sound of Pink Floyd, and this time around I really started to embrace the Pink Floyd sound that was developing through the season of 1970 and 71, which culminated in the album Echoes. And I've made comment in the past, that album, depending on where you are in the world, it was released, I believe, in North America on November 1st, and my birthday, of course, is November 2nd. So it's like that sound was released. That sound was contained in studios and recordings prior to that, but it was like, it's like we are putting this sound out there, and then boom, here I am. So whether there's a metaphysical, mystical connection that can be made there, I really started falling in love with the sound that came out of Echoes, because previously, Dark Side and all the swooning woo woo of David Gilmour and on the guitars, and just the whole package, the airiness, the raw talent of Richard Wright, and the innovative bass lines that Roger would provide, and a kind of incomparable drum and rhythm section holding it together with Nick Mason. I mean, it was a full package for me. It was really, to this day, I discover something new in returning to these tracks, and it's almost always fresh. I love music like that you could return to and keep discovering and discovering and discovering. But in one of these documentaries that I would have viewed in, say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. You had Roger Waters talking about the season of life, and on the title of this video, it's referring to a line in in uh, in the song Echoes. Uh, I am you, and what I see is me. And he kind of explained that is in that season after Sid had departed, there was a desire or a move towards what he called empathy. And it was empathy for the human condition, empathy for, I guess, humanity in general. It was a reaching out, one soul to another. And I'm sure they're out there, but it seems like Roger Waters had a particular gift for doing that. And yeah, I'm kind of at a loss for words, and just bear with me. But there's nothing profound I want to provide here, but it's sort of like a light bulb went off for me. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm getting out of this music. I'm actually connecting with the artist, and we've spoke about this in the past on the music video in my Standing on the Shoulders of Giants series. Is like there's this need for the artist to communicate to the person who's receiving what the artist has produced, and in this case, it's like I suddenly got it. It's like Roger wants to connect with you, and he's actually succeeded in doing that with me to some degree, and I've kind of found that exciting. It sort of unlocked a key to the creative process for me. That at its heart, art and artistry and creativity is about communication. And again, it's something I don't believe AI or computers are ever going to have the imagination or creativity or the humanity to do what is uniquely human. The zeros and ones of the quantum are not. I don't have faith that capability is there. Again, another discussion for another time. That's a deep topic. But yeah, this excitement in me is that, okay, I'm starting to understand why Pink Floyd is touching me in such a deep way. It's Roger has this empathy, and me as a very empathetic person, I am resonating with that. And so where are we here? I'm just looking down my list. I was enjoying all this music, and I had found the video of the Live in Pompeii set, and I kept going back to that track over and over again. And I called the album Echoes previously, but it's Metal is the name of the album. Echoes is the kind of 22-minute long epic track that's basically 15 different songs smushed together that really became the genesis for the sound that would come after it on Dark Side of the Moon. The Metal itself, it starts with this hard driving. I've always described it as a wall of sound. It's almost pushing you. It was one of these days. That was, to me, like the initial hook on the Metal album. And Echoes I was aware of, back in the day, back in the 90s when I was first picking up on this fresh sound that I was hearing through Pink Floyd. But I never gave it much attention. But back in 2021 or 22 when I was kind of revisiting this, I discovered the Pompeii video, and I would watch that Echoes over and over and over. It's like, wow, this is some fantastic music. And the message through the lyrics, It's human connection. Like that's it. I mean, go listen to it yourself. I'll put a link if you're unfamiliar with the Pompeii recordings. The Echoes rendition there is just it's almost better than the studio version. Although there is some studio tracking that's done on it to kind of clean up, I guess, the original live performance they did. But and then that brings me back almost full circle to the wall, and this is kind of, I guess, the profoundness of Pink Floyd comes through, and its ability to connect across people with across all strata, across all experience, and I was able to, I guess, get a degree of healing in my life through reconnecting with the wall. And the context of that is through what I would call currently the failure of my marriage. And I'm sorry to say that, but it kind of became apparent to me about a year and a half ago that things were not going well, and I was starting to withdraw. And around this time last year, I'm sharing this video with you in the last half of March 2025, but in the spring of 2024, the crushing reality of that was really bearing down on my soul. And I kind of went back into that album, The Wall, and I was able to see myself, my situation, what was happening, as well as the way out, how I got there, how I was closing myself off, how I needed to be exposed, or expose myself in order to get the freedom that I wanted. And that album ministered to me in such a profound way. It got me through it. Like, I know Roger Waters, he's got his politics, and he's got his views of God, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he's portraying. That might not be the best word. Roger, if you're ever watching, maybe you could come correct my thinking here. But from my understanding, he's a staunch atheist, and I get that. I get that, based on his background and the loss and his experiences, like we all are in a different place. But I've always considered Roger to be somewhat of a modern day prophet. Go back and listen to him used to death. Go back and listen to the final cut. Not for the musicality so much, but I would classify what Roger was trying to communicate to us was a bit of his lament for this concept I call the post-war dream. And we can maybe do a whole video on that. No, we've got time. I know we're going long on this one, but hey, what else are you gonna do? You're here, you're on YouTube, I'm on YouTube. Let's make the best of this. But it's like what Roger was wanting once he took kind of creative reins of the group, was to keep unpackaging like this post-war dream idea, the promise that we were told, at the end of the Second World War and the end of the Korean War and the end of the Vietnam War, and that dream was never fulfilled. And it's like Roger's heart was aching over that, and he wanted your heart to ache over it as well, and the impact it had on him, through his career and his creativity. The concept for The Wall, for those of you that may not know, it started during the Animals tour, where in Montreal, Roger actually spat on a fan at the end of the show. And it was kind of that visceral response he had to this person who got him so worked up that he realized there's a literal wall between us as the artists and the people that are coming here to see us. It seemed like he was so put off by the fact that people showed up to the concerts to scream and yell and whistle and lose their minds, that they weren't appreciating what he was there to offer, which was he was bearing his soul. And I get that. I get how that could get you worked up, but just that glob of spit, I guess, carried so much inspirational energy in it that the concept of the wall emerged out of that, and he was kind of giving his confession to the world of this is who I am, this is how it happened, this is what you've done to me, but here's the solution as well. And so, yeah, if you're not a fan of the wall, I mean, you should be. I'm sure there's something in for every, like my experience is not being a rock and roll star that's had these experiences, but the story of Pink we can all relate to. We all have disappointments in life. We all have childhood trauma and experiences that we need to manage. We all have the ability to close ourselves off and protect ourselves with a wall, and that wall can be impenetrable. But that wall is not the solution. The solution is on the other side of the wall. But in any case, Roger's politics aside, I actually agree with a lot of his politics more than I disagree. Even though some may consider him somewhat of a leftist, and I don't really fall into the left-right paradigm. That's going to emerge more and more as we go on with some of these discussions. I'm not conservative. I'm not a centrist. I'm somewhere elsewhere. I don't. There's no party. There's no representation that ideologically has the capacity to represent me. Oh, the flies are starting to wake up here. Spring is here. If you hear that buzzing, it's one of my little friends come to visit. In any case, yeah, his politics, his approach to religion, I agree. We should all learn to get along. We should not be judging each other based on who we bow to or who we pray to. Although I do have a position on that, but it's not one of judging or using violence or using power as a means to an end. Like it's complex, but it's simple. But yeah, it's just that idea that the post-war dream was this promise of a better world, and it was never realized. And Roger's not afraid to go into the themes and the ideas and to stir your thinking as to what went wrong and what could we have done better versus what we ought to be doing now. But yeah, there's a spirituality that Roger contains that me as someone with a biblical worldview that embraces the Christian faith, being able to connect with someone who rigidly rejects what I believe in a spiritual sense. There is a spiritual connection. I don't want to get out of my lane here and say anything to or about Roger that's inappropriate, but like there's an element of who you are and your existence that is marked by the finger of God. I have no other way to explain it. I hope nobody finds that offensive, but you find the the handwriting of God in some of the most unlikely places. And I found it in Pink Floyd's music. You know, there's people that will disagree with me. I think that no, that's not the way it is. But I'm telling you, that's the way it is. But just that ability to connect spiritually with another person, another artist, and I think that's kind of baked into the cake too. That you can't avoid spirituality because it's part of your humanity. It's part of your creativity. It was put there. You know, you were created to express yourself like this. And for some, that creativity just flows naturally, and that connectivity is imparted, whether it's a grace of God or just a natural skill or talent. I mean, that's something we could talk about. But Pink Floyd has been a repeated source of therapy through my life, and I do credit that a lot to the storytelling, the impartation of what's inside of a person, namely Roger Waters, and bringing it forth, allowing you to look at it, touch it, you know, handle it, incorporate it, you know, receive it. There's something really special going on there, and you know, this could be a whole topic of conversation. Leave your thoughts in the comments, whether I'm completely out of my tree or if I may have stumbled across something. But just kind of to wrap this up, the last few minutes here, I recently saw a discussion with Andy Edwards. I think you've heard of that name before, and he brought up a kind of an obvious here is like the way the music industry has changed to streaming now, and like just think back on it. I've got some of the stats here. Actually, I need to find the stat I was looking for. But it's like success in music now is almost determined by the number of plays or the number of streams that your music gets, and I mean, that's somewhat of a new concept. Like back in the day, we had records, we had cassettes, we had CDs. There was the radio. I'm just trying to look for overall sales of Dark Side of the Moon here. It charted for 990 weeks. As of 2013, there have been 45 million copies of the record sold worldwide. Well, 45 million, I don't know about you, but I don't buy a record and play it once and then stick it on the shelf. Like, if I could guess how many times I've played Dark Side of the Moon, it would be hundreds, if not 1,000 times. So 45 million times 1,000, like I'm not saying everybody that's ever bought that album played it 1,000 times, but you think of all the radio stations that would have been playing tracks off this music. Like we are talking literally in the billions of plays, but none of those plays got recorded, you know. Where nowadays, like let's just go onto YouTube here. On the Dark Side of the Moon, on Pink Floyd's own site, this is just YouTube. This isn't Spotify or any other streaming services. But on YouTube, on the Pink Floyd YouTube channel, it says Dark Side of the Moon, the 50th anniversary remastered edition, has got 29 million views. I'm probably responsible for 100 of those views, you know. So it is, you know, people listening to it over and over, but you know, I'm not too impressed when I see Old Town Road or something with billion or billions of views. Because back in the day, we didn't have these stats. It's just that music was out there and people took it and listened to it. And so successful acts of today, is Taylor Swift really worth $1 billion as an act, as an entertainer, as a recording artist? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but just the volume of music that would have been played over the years, and I'm just using Pink Floyd as an example because they are one of the biggest selling acts. Look at the Beatles. Like, how many plays do you think the Beatles actually got, prior to streaming? It's possibly in the trillions. maybe exaggerating a bit much, but in any case, like Andy brought up a good point, and so we have to remember, like, some of these legacy bands, like they were big before we had new ways of measuring this kind of success in recording. On that note too, I kind of disagree with Andy in that he was talking a while back about how production is not music, and I completely disagree with that. If you look at Dark Side of the Moon, the song of those bells and the chimes, like, that had to be coordinated. Like, every person that's involved in that process, from the sound engineers to the guy setting up the mics, to the artists and musicians themselves, and then there was the overdubbing and overlays of the voice recordings. There was different sound effects. Like, the Dark Side of the Moon would not be the same if you just had the four guys in a room playing the notes, off their sheet music that they had composed. Like, the whole album is a composition, and it's a team effort, with everybody having their part in it. And that one was, I believe, produced by Alan Parsons. So it was more than just the notes, the sounds which emanated from the instrumentation, the rhythm, the melody and harmony. It was more than that. It was a package. I mean, one of these days, from the album Metal Again, the lyric in that song, I believe it's the only lyric credited to Nick Mason, was originally recorded in a falsetto and slowed down to give that really vocal fry, gravelly sound that came through in the final recording. So I believe the production is music, and so, I mean, maybe we're just disagreeing on definitions here, but I very much believe it's part of the experience. It's part of the art to arrange these songs, to mix them, to have the whole process. It's a full expression of everybody's talents coming together, and so it's more than just the song credits and the creative credits that go on the album jacket. So just kind of want to finish off too. Andy has been somewhat of a spell breaker for me in that he loves Pink Floyd himself. He's a fan, but he kind of gives them their proper due. Is that none of them were the virtuoso musicians. Nick Wright is possibly the most talented of the group. They all came together and had a sound. But it's like Roger Waters isn't a virtuoso bassist. They all kind of learned their respective instruments, not later in life, but they weren't musical prodigies by any sense. Even David Gilmour had kind of said, once we discovered our sound, we had gotten away from that space rock noodling type sound, and it sounded like he was glad that happened, and his creativity and somewhat unique sound began to emerge through this process where they had discovered their sound. But I want to say something somewhat hardly controversial right now. I think, and just follow me here, if David Gilmour had never replaced Syd Barrett, I think Pink Floyd would still have been a mega act throughout the 70s. And the reason I say that is it kind of goes back to the Amused to Death. Like, Roger Waters would have found somebody that provided the sound that he was going after. It just seemed like he had the vision, and the collaboration and the chemistry was there with the group as it was assembled. But I don't see that David Gilmour was instrumental. And you might not like hearing that, but Andy Edwards kind of broke that spell for me. It's like the woo woo, those guitar fills and the phrasing, like it's all magical. And that tone, it captures you, but it's more than just that to me. And it's the ability to make a concept album, to unify the conjunction of the spiritual and the message that you're trying to convey, and it gets out there. It gets out there. So again, I'm not trying to throw any shade on David Gilmour. He's an amazing act. I'm saddened by the fact that there's an ongoing feud / brawling effort going on with the surviving band members. Richard Wright has passed away of cancer several years ago, somewhere around, I can look it up, but I believe it was around 2015 or something like that. But kind of this bitterness that has emerged between primarily Waters and Gilmour, it doesn't do much for my heart there. So it's sad. I'm not hoping there's a reconciliation. It's not needed at this time. And I don't even know why I'm going here now, but I think Roger would have found a way to make Pink Floyd into his vision without David Gilmour. But I do appreciate that David Gilmour was a part of it. He, again, is fairly influential as a guitarist for inspiring people to pick up the guitar and start exploring. And another thing I appreciate about the band is their willingness to experiment, with different types of equipment and the quadraphonic sound and the 16-track recording. Like it was a whole effort in creativity and innovation and expense. They had a very expensive sound setup just with the different synthesizers and machinery and electronics. It as far as pioneering sound concepts and music, I mean, Pink Floyd is virtually second to none, in my opinion. They're not the only ones, but as pioneers, they have done a lot. But if this video gets to either Andy Edwards or Roger Waters, I actually do have a creative project in mind. I think Andy Edwards is particularly able to accomplish a concept I would put forth to him. And I don't want to kind of give it away, but if word ever gets back to him, I have an offer he can't refuse, kind of, let's put it that way. I think he'd be excited about it. And like I say, uniquely, he has the unique ability to actually pull it off. That I don't really like. He's got the skill set, the talents, and the connections to be able to do something like this. But again, thank you to all the band members. Richard Wright, God rest your soul, but Nick Mason, David Gilmour, Syd Barrett, of course, has passed on as well. Again, I'm not. I appreciate what he started, but I was never impacted by Sid particularly. But Roger Waters, I mean, you have somehow connected in a way that I can only describe as profound. And if our paths ever crossed one day, I would give you a gigantic hug. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you've done. And we'll see you on the next video.